member spotlights are a way to help members of the Catholic business leader community to get to know each other a little bit better. So thanks for taking the time to talk to me for a few minutes there, Amanda. So tell everybody, tell the members who you are, where you live, and what's the name of your business.
Yeah, so my name is Amanda Rohwedder. I'm so happy to be here today. I am the founder of Temple and Table. It's a nutrition ministry. I'm based in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, great. And how did you come across this awesome path, this calling? Do you call it a calling?
I would. I still refer to it as kind of a passion project of mine. So I originally got the inspiration from a mutual friend of ours, a priest, Father Nathan Cromley. And we were talking about just, I was wanting to serve the church more and kind of lean into my vocation that I didn't feel that I had really found yet or wasn't living in. And so he just asked me what I was passionate about. And I told him nutrition. And we started to talk about different ideas of ways that could sort of integrate into the spiritual life. And it kind of evolved into what it is today. So I think a few important lessons that I learned from that is to, God puts passions on our heart. Mm-hmm. And if we follow them, it's likely the place where he wants us or where we're able to live the most fully. And I still consider it a passion project because every time I work on Temple and Table things, it just gives me so much energy and so much joy. And so that's kind of how I knew, okay, I'm going to go where the joy is and where the peace is with this.
So from Father Nathan's challenge in a way to where you're at now. I mean, tell us a little bit more, or tell your members more about that path. I mean, it's such an interesting combination of, and actually where you came up with it, even maybe at the very beginning, how you came up with the name.
Yeah, that was 2015 that I met with him, and I actually didn't launch the business until January of 2017. So it took a little bit of evolving and for some meat to be on it. And I was kind of throwing the idea out to different people, and they kind of confirmed back to me that there was a need for this. And so that's when you know that you kind of have something that might make a good business, when people say, oh yeah, that's unique and that seems to fill a need that I see, Yeah. The other so I just started to talk to more people that were in ministry and that were saying sort of where they saw the holes, and what it evolved into with prayer and these, consults from mentors and things like that was this idea about evangelizing through the meal. And that if we are integrating our spiritual and our physical lives, that we can really meet people where they're at better and live out of our bodies into our vocation that much better. And I really appreciate things like Atolo that sort of take that integrated approach to as well to business. So
it's interesting that you bring that up, because I was talking to somebody yesterday and they were talking about how stress in their lives, in this particular person's life, actually affects his whole body, right? When you talk about the stress from the outside and how it translates in the body, for sure. So it's interesting how we see these different elements of our spiritual life, and then all the aspects of our temporal life, our what do you call it? Secular life, I suppose. Okay, so what I'm doing, faith and integrating faith and work, integrating sports and faith, and you're integrating nutrition with faith, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the premise of it. I mean, have you I guess, what were some surprises maybe along the way? What are your findings out there after working in this, after now, 3 years or so?
Yeah, it continues to be a surprise all the time. And I think that's kind of the fun about being an entrepreneur too, is that there's so much that you don't even expect to come out of it. So I think some of the most surprising things are some of the partnerships, honestly, and projects that I've been able to contribute to and work on that I didn't really expect. I wouldn't have immediately seen a connection between them. But Couple to Couple League is a great example of that. They walk couples through natural fertility planning. And what was interesting is that a lot of my background is in women's health when I was going after medical school. So it was really neat to kind of see things that I had a passion for before now coming back to the forefront in this business. So I think to kind of answer the question in a more direct way,
Yeah.
it's been kind of surprising to see the way that God has kind of woven together things that I was working on before this business was even in my mind, and to see where he's made those kind of connections in my life, if you will, so that it just brings me that much more joy and that much more peace as I'm doing it. So I would say that's the most surprising thing, actually. It's a good question.
So nothing, well, we hear this all the time, is nothing in your life is ever wasted with God, is it?
Yeah, that's so true.
So your background, you said you were in medical school, your background is in nutrition?
Yeah, so my bachelor's is in nutrition, and then I went on to get a master's in medical science, and my concentration was actually in women's health. But I always, so my goal was to go to medical school, but I always joke, God had other plans for me, and I wouldn't change a thing, because those experiences and that path is what made me confident enough to jump into this business venture, I would say, looking back. So that certainly wasn't wasted. And then I worked as a nutritionist for the Women, Infants, and Children program for the Department of Health. So I worked with pregnant moms and breastfeeding moms and kids up to 5, lots of babies around me, which was fun. And then I was sort of got into medical sales and things like that. And the whole time, though, I always knew that I kind of tended more toward the preventative health side of things rather than the reactive. And so I was always trying to build my knowledge on things around that concept, that approach to wellness and health. And I continue to be kind of a student of wellness today, but
well, I imagine this whole world is the world of nutrition and food is always evolving.
It is, yes.
I mean, I'm assuming you're always tapped into the latest trends and what's going on, and the whole, like, what do they call it? Is it clean movement, or I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to call it.
Like clean eating and.
Yeah, I just walked into an area. I have no idea what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Is it clean eating?
Yes.
And, that whole thing is really kind of interesting when you think about the fact that everybody's into that, not necessarily just people of faith. I guess here's another question, little maybe a little off topic, but it's kind of related, which is what do you tell somebody, or how do you respond to somebody who, when you talk about integrating food or nutrition or eating with faith, and they're like, oh, please, I just want to eat, and the pushback is that versus what your whole mission is about. How do you help them understand your mission a little bit better?
Yeah, I think the really kind of beautiful thing that I found about evangelizing through the meal is that when people are cooking together, or they're talking about taking care of their body in a more intentional way, to your point, it's everywhere, and it's so on the top of our minds. I think a lot of times when I make that connection, people actually are more receptive to it than they are not.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's such an easy entry point. And the cool thing is that the meal is woven throughout salvation history. So it's like you know what, if God saw value in using that to evangelize,
Yeah.
then we certainly can too. So I I know I didn't really answer your question, but I think the the barrier to entry, so to speak, is so low when you're talking about sharing meal and food, because we do it all day, every day.
We
Like,
do. We do all the
you
time.
know,
It's natural, isn't it?
it's so natural. And so I think that's kind of like the genius about it. It's a little bit of like a, you can kind of sneak faith and those concepts in a lot easier than you maybe would normally.
Yeah,
It's just not as intimidating of an entry point. That's,
sure.
you know,
Sure. Oh, it's fantastic.
yeah.
So what's your number one skill that you had to develop or you just naturally developed as you were creating Temple and Table?
I think the back end business side of things was definitely a skill that I did not come into naturally. As far as, okay, you need to make this business decision, as far as making sure that you make enough profit for your time and pricing and all the things that kind of go into the back end that I didn't even think of, website development, taxes, you know, all of those things were really skills that I had to have a steep learning curve with. But um, the creative part of it was kind of what kept me going. You know, it's like
Yeah.
you can't expect to enjoy every aspect of running a business, I found, but it's like that 5 to 10% where you really are living in the genius that you love is what drives the rest of the, you know, 85% day-to-day running of a business.
Right. Yeah, that's fantastic because I think
Yeah.
well, everyone has their natural abilities, and as your mission, you call it a mission,
Mhm.
grows,
Certainly do.
you might find yourself in a specific area that you really enjoy, like being the more of the visionary, and then being able to give the accounting and the taxes and everything else to people who absolutely that's their calling. They love diving into spreadsheets, things like that, and sorting out numbers and all that kind of stuff. So related, what's been your biggest challenge to your mission and or its growth to date?
To date. So I would say my biggest challenge was probably just because I do this in addition to another full time job.
Mhm.
I think the challenge for me is uh, growing it in a way that makes sense for me as a single person business owner and entrepreneur, just a one person show, you know.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's been a challenge is that I have to find a balance between working on the right things and prioritizing the right things at the right time because I, you know, just have only certain amounts of time that I can work on it. So I think that's been probably the biggest challenge and still continues to be to just find that balance and work on the most important things to grow it.
And I know you probably had already said this, but I'll ask it again. So what do you
Okay.
what gets you up in the morning? What do you absolutely love about the development and the creation of Temple and Table every single day? What gets you up to do
Yeah,
this?
I love that question because it's so important to never lose that heart and that passion and to keep
Yeah.
it at the forefront. So I appreciate you bringing it to the forefront now. I think for me, just cooking and finding ways to, well, I love to develop new recipes and just spend time in the kitchen. So that's totally it. And I design my events around, you know, what's seasonal and what would be
Mhm.
easy for people and things like that. So I think that's a really fun aspect of my job that I love. And the other side of that is when someone tells me, oh my gosh, I'm cooking so much more and I'm loving cooking so much more just based on our interaction together or going to your event or seeing your recipe online. I think that like both of those things in tandem kind of, they just bring me so much energy.
I can appreciate that because I still have, my wife and I still have the recipe. It's, was it salmon cakes with avocado? I don't even know
Grandma,
what to call it. Oh my gosh, that's great.
I'm
That's
so glad.
fantastic. And it's so simple, right? And it's so
Yeah.
delicious, which is great. What would you like to get from the community, and what do you think you can give to that community of peers?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I have so much to learn, and I love to just be, as much as I'm a student of wellness and nutrition, I also understand that as a business owner, I need to be a student of business and people that are more experienced and wiser. And I find a lot of value in networking with other Catholic owned businesses. That's been a hallmark of any growth that I've had with Temple and Table, has typically been connected to a fellow business owner in some way, fellow Catholic business owner in some way.
Oh.
You're included in that, Paul. So, so
So
yeah,
it's let's see. What was I gonna ask you? Lastly, I guess is what is actually your business model? What does Temple and Table deliver either in products or services so people know that? And I'm asking this because, obviously, these are just the lead-in questions for people within the community itself to get to know you, and then to reach out to you directly. There's ways through email, through instant messaging, to then further this conversation with individuals who are interested. So like, okay, well, that's great, but what do you guys do? What does Temple and Table provide?
absolutely. So we have a few different in-person events. Of course, we've had to get creative, but
Yeah.
um, I the business model is to cultivate events that integrate spirituality and nutrition. So that could look like I have a few different talks that are designed on around different topics, and then I also, our hallmark event is called Table for 12, of course, before COVID, when gatherings were possible. And that is basically a group of 8 to 12 people. And it's an evening where you're able to, you prepare parts of the meal together, and then it just cultivates really deep conversations. They've been just really beautiful evenings and events that we've been able to do. And it could look, our audience would be anything from, team building for an office, or a youth group or a young adult group. It just kind of runs the gamut between all that. And then we have a small shop of products that are meant to just bring kind of a beauty and a mindfulness into your kitchen. And I will say, with COVID, it's been so interesting to pivot. I'm sure other business owners on here have had to get creative, but I think when you're an entrepreneur, you just have to always be open to opportunities and look at things like this as an opportunity. And it's actually been a great year for Temple and Table. I've, written more articles. I've done online cooking classes and pivoted more to online creative events, just to think outside the box. But people can find more information at templeandtable.com. And then I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. Temple and Table is the handle.
You got me. I was going to ask you that.
I'm on top of it, Paul.
I know. Yeah, well, it's great to talk with you about this and about your work and your mission. Any last thing you'd like to share with the members at all, other than your website, and anything at all, or are we good?
I would just say thank you for what you do and being a Catholic voice in the business world. I feel so grateful to be in community with everyone in this network. And thank you to you, Paul, for all of your support and for inviting me to be here.
You are welcome. One of the joys of what I do is actually meeting people like you, and then connecting you to other people, which is what we should be doing every single day. So people
Absolutely.
call it networking, you could call it evangelization, or it could be both. So
We'll call it
fantastic.
both. We'll call it both.
Yeah, we'll call it both. We'll have to figure out a word to mash those two together. I don't even want to even try it right now, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, if I come up with something, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.